In this lesson, we'll be working with the layers and layer groups, and we're going to create a layer mask to create the illusion that this text element is actually behind these superheroes. In fact, within the layers, it's in front of it, but we're going to show you how to use a layer mask so that you can create and isolate areas, hide areas, and show areas basically within a layer. And that applies to any kind of layer, including a layer group that you see here in my structure. So basically, I have all of these three elements, or rather four elements, sorry, inside of a group. And I'm going to show you how to create this group and sharing a common mask. So we'll get to that ultimately in our lesson when we create a new one. I can also just show and hide the whole group at once. But essentially, we're creating a mask that's going to be affecting four different layers. And then we've got our background layer that we start with. Okay, so let me go over to our start file called heroes.jpg. Right away when you open that, I'd like you to do a save as and save it as a Photoshop file, .psd, and save it as your last name and the lesson number. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go save as. And let me just find a place to save this here, Loyalist. I'll make a new folder. I'll call it Digital Imagery. Lessons. Okay. And I'm going to save this file here. So I will go down to Format, choose Photoshop, PSD. Where are we here? Oh, it's the very first one. And name it your last name and the lesson number. So I'm going to guess it's lesson number 4 here, but if it's not, just, make it appropriate to the lesson number. So I'm going to go _04 for the naming convention, and then just save that. Okay. So at this point, I think the first thing we'll do is we'll actually generate some text right on top of this background layer. So the text tool is over here. And I can set the color here with the foregrounds. In fact, it's probably better to set it up here in the properties panel. And let's see here. You know what? For now, actually, I can live with this color. So I'm just going to keep it to something similar to that. And let's see here. Helvetica New Bold. I'll start with that. Let's see for my text. Let me just start with something like maybe 24 points. Helvetica New Bold. I'm actually going to change that to Impact. I know Impact is a nice, very nice bold font for presenting things. Impact Regular. Okay, so Alignment Center. I'm going to click right here. And I'm going to ask you to type your first name in full. So, Daniel. You know what? Maybe uppercase would be better for the sake of this. I'm going to retype that in. I double-clicked it to highlight it. I'm hitting my caps lock, and I'm just going to retype it in uppercase. There we go. Now, I want to resize that. I can definitely resize it here. For example. Oh, of course, it needs to be highlighted to affect it through here. But I'm going to actually go to my Move tool and resize it with the Transform tool, which is right down here under Edit Transform. And I'm just going to go with the keyboard shortcut, which is on the Mac Command T, on the PC Control T. And you're going to get these handles. So let me explain resizing using this Transform feature. To resize proportionally, you simply have to grab a corner. Now you notice it's actually anchored from the top left. If you want to anchor it from its center point, then you also hold down the Option key on the Mac, the Alt key on the PC. You can also move it around while you're working. So I'm going to make this quite big to fill most of that sky area. And what's important is I do want to cover the kids. So I'm just going to hold my Option key down again and come about that big. And that's pretty good there, I think. I'm going to hit my Return key to accept that. Now, to center it properly, here's a little trick you can use. Go to your Rectangle Marquee tool. Just go Select All. You can go Select All. It's Command A on the Mac, Control A on the PC. And then go to your Move tool. And you can center things right here. This will actually center it on the screen. There we go. Okay. Then I'm going to hit Command D or Control D on the PC to deselect. I will save my file. I already saved it once, so I just have to go Command S or Control S on the keyboard, or use my file pull down menu. So we're just going to start with this, and we're going to create a mask on this layer. So it's called a layer mask, and basically the way it works is it's an alpha channel that is attached to the layer, and you can paint with black and white or any shade of gray to create transparent, fully opaque, or any variation of translucency in between those two states. So let's start by just clicking on this icon down here, and it's what creates a layer mask. Now it starts blank, if you will, with a full white screen. I'm going to use my paintbrush, and I'm just going to come over to the brush tool here. I'm going to set it. I'm going to set it to a very hard edge. Hardness, it actually by default looks like it is at a hardness 100%. Size, I'll leave it at its default. I'm going to show you a trick how to change the size as you go. If I'm happy with that, I hit return. And while I have the layer mask highlighted with that brush tool, while painting black, I'm going to turn off my caps lock, because with the caps lock off, I can see the size of the brush. Now that's huge. So I did say I was going to show you the trick on how to change the size quickly. It's a keyboard shortcut. If you look to the right of the letter P, there are two square brackets. The left bracket shrinks the brush size, the right bracket increases it. So while you're painting, you can quickly increase and decrease that size. So I'm going to start with, let's say that's the size I want. If I want to hide something, I'm actually going to zoom in, and it's Command plus on my keyboard, Control plus on the PC, and I can go in and start to basically, looks like I'm erasing, but I'm actually hiding, which is much different than erasing. Okay, and I want to kind of expose where the kid's shape is so I can hide that text. Now it's a bit of trial and error if I leave it like this, so I'm going to propose another little trick where we actually make our text see-through, translucent, and that way we aren't guessing where we're going to paint. So to do that, I'm going to temporarily come over here to my layers, click on the text icon, and go over to my opacity, and just move that slider down. And you see how that exposes where I need to knock out the mask. So having done that, I'm going to hit my return key and select that. Go back to the mask by selecting it in my layer. See, there's a focus on the content, and there's also a focus on the mask layer. That will certainly make a difference, okay? So I'm now focusing on the mask layer. I'm going to zoom up so that I can assume accuracy. I'm just going Control plus on my keyboard here. Actually Command plus on the Mac, but assuming you're working on a PC, it would be Control plus. I'm going to make my brush smaller. Again, that's the left square bracket on my keyboard. And I'm still on the black color. I do have the mask layer highlighted, and I'm just going to come in here and paint away. Now a little trick you can do is you can click once and then hold your shift key down. You can actually make straight lines. So anywhere where it's similar to a straight line, you can come in here, click at your start point, shift click your end point, and it does connect the dots. I'm going to zoom right in on those hands. Now it's fairly low res, so you can't see the pixels at the zoom level. I'm also going to make my brush a bit smaller and just come around here. Now if it's not perfect, no problem. You can certainly make a second or more passes. You see I kind of missed at the top there a bit. To come back and push it back, switch your color. See this little switcheroo button? I can toggle my colors. Now it's white. That's actually revealing again. So I can come back as many times as I want to perfect that. Black hides, white shows. Okay, so I'm back on the black. I'm going to hide the text. Remember, I'm working on this text layer. I'm going to make my brush bigger. That's the right square bracket. And I'm just clicking here right now, because that's such a large shape while I'm zoomed in. It actually works well. Now again, for the arm, I'm going to decrease my brush size here. Okay, so you kind of get the idea, right? I'm holding my shift key down and I'm making some very short straight lines, which is working for what I'm trying to do here. And just touch up that. Okay, now come into the hand area. Again, I'm just clicking. I will say shorter click and drags is probably more prudent because if you make a mistake, you're going to undo less good work. And speaking of that, let's save our file as we go here. Now if I zoom out, that's Control minus on the keyboard. I can see what I've got so far, right? So let's just move on to the next kid now. And I'll zoom in. This one's relatively easy. I'm just going to come up here, and then as I get close to the edge here, I'm going to do some short little clicks with my shift key and just come around. Okay. All right, I can make my brush bigger and just come in here and kind of fill in that space. And if I want to just refine it a bit, I can come out here. I can see there's a little bit of blue hanging in there. If I needed to correct, which it looks like I don't have to, I would switch to white and then just start pushing it back. For example, it's exaggerated here a bit. And again, you can go back and forth as often as you like until you're happy with it. Okay, I'm going to save that again. And we have one more person to deal with for the masking. Now I kind of got away easy with how my letters fall, but whatever it takes, right? The idea here is that you understand the concept. And I'm just coming in here, and I probably should be zoomed in a little bit on this. Spacebar, by the way, to drag around. Okay, zoom up and down, Control plus and minus to zoom up and down, Spacebar to drag your image around so that you can see whatever you need to see. Again, I'm using some short clicks with the shift key, making some short straight lines. And now I'm just letting go, and I'm just freehand. Again, shorter clicks are better. I will have to come back a little bit and push that back on the outside, but not so bad here. Okay, so I will toggle my colors. Just push that back a bit. Okay, and then toggle them again and continue where I was. I'm going to make my brush very big now because these are just some big areas with no edges anymore. And here we go. All right, save that. I'm going to save it on my keyboard, Command S. And that's our mask. Okay, that's probably the heavy lifting. You can go Command or Control 0 to fit in window as well. And again, let me just save that. Oh, it looks like it was saved because it was grayed out. That's how I know it was saved. Now you notice there's a little lock icon here, right? So let me show you what that is. That means if I move my layer around with the lock on, I actually could mess it up, right? I'm moving the mask and you see the silhouette of the kids and the letters. Let me undo that, Command Z, and show you how I could move the letters around and retain that mask. It's simply unlocking the layer, then focus on the content area. And now with my move tool selected, check this out. That's really nice. Now if I bring it lower, I'm going to bring it a bit lower actually. In fact, I'm going to make it bigger and make some corrections. I'm just being fussy here. Okay, Option key down to resize. Okay, hit my return key to accept that, and let me just reposition that. Okay, so since I made some changes, I'm going to come back into my mask, go back to my brush tool, and get very fussy with this. Okay, now I can shift click here. It's basically a straight line, and then just come in carefully. If you have a stylus, this probably works easier for you, but it's fine with the mouse as well. Okay, so let me make my brush a bit smaller here. Come along the arm. Short strokes. And then zoom up a bit. And that's to ensure accuracy, of course. Okay, this is kind of my second pass. Let's say you changed your mind. You just have to unlock it. You know what? I'm going to lock that up again just while I'm thinking about it. And just leave it like that, and then come back to my task at hand here. All right, so let's make these changes here. I'm just freehand drawing right now. I am letting go of the mouse, though. I'm not doing it all in one stroke. Again, just to be prudent in case I need to undo something. I don't kill a lot of good work. Okay, just come down here, down around the chest area. Okay, make my brush a bit bigger, almost done. But it is about accuracy. Let me just shrink my screen. Actually, I'll go Command 0, fit screen, save my file. And my mask is good to go. My text is even bigger here. Actually, I think there's a little spot over here. Let me just grab that. Push that back a little with my white. There we go. Now I can make that text opaque again. We go back to the text layer, focus, and go back to opacity, and just drag that back up to 100. And there we go. And I can see around the kids' heads, actually, now that I have that fully opaque, I should do a little refinement. I am going to ask you to be very accurate with this. So back to the mask. This is pushing it back, so it's on the white. Back to my brush tool, right? And I'll make the brush a bit smaller, and I'm just going to come in and push that back. I'm using my Shift key, making very short little lines. Here I'm going to have to make the brush very small, and I will zoom up even closer. Spacebar to move around. And let's just get this. We call it white crud when you see sort of white pixels around the edge of something. And I'm getting rid of the white crud. It's actually what we call it. Okay, and a little pixel here. Now I'm being super fussy. Okay, and the girl's hair at the top. All right, save that. Command 0 to resize again. Back to my move tool. And the next step will be to add a gradient. Now if I go back to my finished file, I'll show you how that was done. The gradient was done on a separate layer. And I'm just going to show you that. And I'll actually even hide the text. So it was done as a color going to translucent, filling the same area as the text area occupies. So I'm going to show you how you can create a selection based on an existing shape. And with that selection highlighted, you make a new layer, and we're going to fill it with a gradient. All right. Turn the sky back on, turn the stroke back on. So let's make a new layer. So with the text layer selected, create new layer. Call it gradient. And we're going to kind of create an illusion where we can go from one color to another. We can actually go through several colors as a rainbow, but we're going to go from one color to transparent in this case. We're going to leverage the shape of our name from the text element. Okay, so the way we do that is you can just simply go over to the icon. Remember, there's two icons here, not the mask, but the content icon. If you control click or command click on it, look what it did. It just magically made a selection based on the shape of what is on that content layer. That is pretty good and extremely useful. Now let's select the layer we wish to apply some ink to, if you will, which is the gradient layer. I'm going to go to my color chips. I'm just going to randomly pick a green color here, fairly bright green, like that, and then go to my gradient tool. So let's talk about the gradient tool a bit here. There are two basic gradient tools that you can select from: classic gradient and gradient. Gradient is the newer one. I can show you both, and you can choose which one you want to use. Gradient, the newer one, is a little easier to edit. It keeps it as a vector. Where classic gradient does commit to pixels on the screen, although you can redo it, cover it up over again, and it's probably the same amount of energy. So let's start with classic gradient. Now over here in this window, we have different modes to paint as well. I'm going to just open up basics. There's I'll say the two that you're going to use the most: foreground to background or foreground to transparent. Double click, in this case, foreground to transparent. You'll see a little checkerboard symbolizing transparency. So now it's going to go from this foreground to transparent. The next item is the shape of the gradient. This is linear. This will create a circular shape, radial. These three are kind of specialized. They have their place, but it's basically the linear and the radial that you'll use almost all the time, one of those two. So we do want it linear. I want the gradient to start at the top and kind of end at the bottom. And that's done while on the tool by clicking and dragging, and the paint or the ink will fill the area that is currently selected on the currently selected layer. Here we go. I'm going to click here and I'm going to drag pretty well to the bottom of the letters. I will also hold my Shift key down because that will constrain it to a perfect vertical. And there we go. And if I hide the text, that's what we just painted. So I'm actually happy with that. If you're not happy with it, undo. I have to do a couple of undos here and try it again. Okay, I'm going to suggest, you start about 1/4 of the way in, which means that the top quarter will be an opaque solid color. And from there, it will ease its way and ramp down to transparent. So again, now if I don't hold the shift key down, it'll go in any direction and it could get a little bit weird like that. So I suggest holding the shift key down to constrain. It will constrain to the vertical and the horizontal as well as the 45 degree. So I'm going to go just a little past, because that way there will still be a little ink on the bottom end. Not that I need it because I have the blue in the background, but I'm just going to go that far. Okay, if I'm happy with that, I'm going to save. I'm just saving on the keyboard. And I'm going to create another layer, and we're going to actually add what's called a stroke. Well, actually, I did say I would show you the other version of the gradient, didn't I? So let me do that very quickly. I'm going to delete this and switch the gradient type to gradient, which is the newer one. I'll call it the newer one. And all the other things need to be set the same. So we're good to go here. Again, I will click and drag. This one you can actually see manifest itself live, which is nice, right? And leave it like that. And that's good to go, but it does create like a mask and a vector layer, okay? Not an issue whatsoever. It's just a different approach to the same kind of command, if you will. The nice thing about that is if I move away from it, and I'm working on other things. Now, it will create its own layer, though. It won't go into that layer I created. I can come back to it, and if I go back to the layer, the gradient tool, it is editable. Okay, I can grab that handle. I can do all kinds of things with it. So I'm going to say you choose whichever one you like. I'm going to go and stick with the old traditional one, if you don't mind. So I'm going to delete that, which gives me an opportunity to show you how to delete a layer. Just with that layer selected, I'm just going to hit the garbage can, and away we go. So I'll have to reselect that text again. So that was the Command key on the Mac, Control key on the PC. Click on the content part of the layer, generates a selection, then highlight the layer you wish to drop the ink on. And I'm going to go back to Classic Gradient, and I'm just going to click there, shift click downwards, and apply that. Okay, deselect is Control D or Command D. Actually, I don't want to deselect. I want to keep that selection. Let me highlight that. I do want to save it though, and I will create a new layer for what will be my stroke. So I'm going to name that layer Stroke. Okay, and to apply a stroke, it will be the foreground color. So let's see here. Let me just find something. Okay, maybe we'll go with something not too contrasty, but maybe that cadmium yellow. And under Edit, you can apply a stroke this way. Inside, center, outside. If you wish to retain the integrity of the font, I always recommend outside, and most designers would do that. Otherwise, it encroaches on the font and does change its form. But having said that, while doing this, I'm probably going to have to come back and adjust the mask again, but so be it. Okay, so that would be outside. Let me just say 10, make it quite prominent, and go like that. There we go. Yeah, as you can see, the mask will need to be adjusted. Now let me undo that though. Maybe 10 is a bit much. Edit stroke, maybe I'll go with 5. Let's try 5. Okay, yeah, it's just a little more pleasant to look at. And I can live with that. So let me just go Control D, or Command D to deselect. And let's see here. Now, right now the mask is only being applied to the text layer. So that brings me to a place where I'm going to leverage the existing mask. I have a couple of options here that I'm going to present to you. I'll show you the first one, which I'm not going to live with, but I'll show it to you because it's quite viable, which is to just simply copy the mask from one layer to the next. The way you do that is you select the mask layer, and with your Option or Alt key down, drag it to the new layer you wish to apply it to. See, now it applied to the kids here, and it actually is working. There's a couple little touch-ups here and there, but for the most part, it's doing the job, right? If I hide that there, you can see it. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Now, I didn't have to do it to the gradient because the gradient's falling inside. Actually, I did have to do it to the gradient. I see the kids' faces are green, so definitely to the gradient as well. So let me Option click and drag that also. It was subtle. I wasn't really picking up on it there. There, that's better. So now it's actually blocking out that gradient as well. Okay, so that's one solution. I'm actually going to delete these and show you a different solution, which I think in the bigger picture is probably strategically a better way to go. But either or, it all works. I'm going to select that layer though, or that layer mask, and hit the garbage can. It's going to ask me if I want to apply. I'm going to say no, I want to delete. So yeah, I'm taking a couple of steps backwards here temporarily. Now I can go delete layer mask with the right click as well. And I don't want to delete that one. So here's what I propose to do. I'm going to make a layer group. I can even approach that a couple of ways, but let me select all three layers by shift clicking in the layers, and this little folder creates what's called a layer group. And with them selected, I just embedded them into this group. Okay, so I'm going to rename this group Masked Items. Okay, and just save that again. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to borrow the mask from the text layer and actually shift it up to the folder. By doing that, it's going to mask everything inside of the folder. So one mask to rule them all. All right. To do that, I just grab it and drag it. There we go. Now I'm getting that one mask to affect all things. You see what I mean? Now I don't have to go and touch up 3 different masks. I will touch up the one mask though. So I'm going to select it. I will zoom in and back to my paint tools for one final pass right here. And I'm going to make my brushes bigger. And let me see here. Over here we've got some small issues. I want to block, so I'm going to make that a bit smaller. You see with the stroke particularly, it's creating some issues in here. So I'm just coming across and I'm just touching up. Here, not so much of a problem. Looks like we're good there. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller and get this little bit in the arm, and there's a little bit at the armpit. Stuff you probably could have gotten away with, but when you have a close look, you can see it. Okay, I think we're good here now. So let me just go Command 0 to resize. Save my file, Command S. And I guess the last thing we'll do is we'll just drop a sky in there. So we'll use a gradient one more time. So I'm just going to select the text layer, make a new layer, call it sky. And I'm just going to find a nice blue and make a gradient from that blue to transparent. So let's go over to our colors here, my color chips. And I'm going to find something that's very sky-ish. I'll say that. Over to my gradient tool. I'll stick with the classic gradient, linear. So all my settings are good for what I want to do. I just want a vertical gradient. So I'm going to start at the top here, probably at the top of the letters, and I'm going to drag to the horizon line. Like this. And, you know what? Let me undo that. Why don't, just for the sake of demonstration, this one I'm going to use the modern gradient. There we go. So we'll try that again. Oh, for some reason it's giving me the green color for the foreground. Let me just go back in here, double click on that. I think that was actually a glitch in my computer. But regardless, foreground to transparency, double click it. That was a little weird. And again, click and drag with the shift key down. Now, because this one gives you a preview, you go until you like it. And I'm going to say I like it right there. Okay. me just click away from that with the move tool. So that could be edited if I was to select that and go back to the gradient tool. That could be edited with the handles. Okay, this gradient would change the bias, and these actually change the location of the start and end points of the gradient. It's actually quite nice. Okay, so back to the move tool, and I see an asterisk there, which means my file hasn't been saved to the latest changes. So let's just do a quick save here. And we're pretty well done, except I'm going to drag this behind the text. It's subtle, but now it's not coming over the text. It was hard to see. There was a little shift, but it was behind the green, so you were almost getting away with it, but really it needs to be behind the text. And that does complete the file and the assignment. So again, if I was to turn off this layer, that's what I start with. It's in a group. Actually, let me show you how to turn the mask on and off. I didn't show you that. Highlight the mask. If you shift click it, you can hide it. You're just turning it off. It's not deleted, but it's turned off. Okay, that's shift clicking. To see the mask, to actually see the mask, it would be Option or Alt click. And I'm actually looking at the mask itself, and I can paint on here if I wanted, and you can actually see what you've done, right? And just to change that, you just click the same Alt or Option key again on the mask, and it brings you back to seeing the RGB channels. Okay, and that's how we create layer masks. Work with them strategically. We created a layer group to make it the most efficient mask, so that if we have changes, it does affect all the layers that it's affecting, which happens to be 4 different layers. And then we had our background layer at the bottom of the pile, uninterrupted. No destruction created to the original state of that graphic. Again, there's my asterisk, so let's save that. So that is your assignment. I want you to hand that into Canvas when you're done.